January 28, 2025 was a day like no other in Kinshasa. That is the capital city of the Democratic Republic of Congo. A day on which the city witnessed immense violence in the name of protests, as angry mobs targeted various foreign embassies and diplomatic installations with intentions to vandalize, loot and ultimately set them ablaze, to send a message to the international community that the Congolese people were unhappy with the respective countries' conduct in the ongoing war between the Congolese army and M23 fighters that are being assisted by the Rwandan military. And it's in the aftermath of these ugly developments that left the embassies of Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, France and Belgium badly or partially defiled in one way or another, that we have prepared this video to look at the real reasons why these embassies were targeted, why the leaders of the respective countries are currently under fire not just in the Democratic Republic of Congo but on the African continent in general, and the possibility of the Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi being an isolated and desperate man. As you may already be aware, the two groups that are fighting in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo are on one side, the Congolese army that is being supported by forces from the Southern African Development Community Mission in DRC, and on the other side, the aforementioned M23 rebels that are being supported by the Rwandan military. Then in the conflict, the Congolese government that is led by President Felix Tshisekedi, and its allies like Cyril Ramaphosa's South Africa, are aiming at totally crashing the M23 group of rebels, which they have designated as a terror group that should not be entertained or listened to. However, the M23 group and its allies like the Rwandan military is fighting because it says it has legitimate concerns and needs to be listened to by President Tshisekedi instead of being dismissed. That the group is only asking for the Congolese government to come to the negotiation table and see how the Tutsi and other ethnic communities that have over the years been marginalized and displaced by perennial civil wars, and those that used to occupy parts of the current Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo before the installation of the international border between Rwanda and DRC can be allowed to go back to their villages and proceed with their lives, and as well negotiate on how former FDLR fighters can be integrated into the Congolese military. So on the day of the protests in Kinshasa, it was clear that the protesters were mainly pro-Tshisekedi, or in support of the Congolese army and its allies, that is going by the targets that were vandalized or looted. And before we proceed, let's take a look at what the leaders of each of these countries that were targeted had done or said. For Rwanda, that was the most obvious target of the protesters, President Paul Kagame, who is the biggest M23 supporter and sympathizer, has since the beginning of this conflict, or rather since the formation of M23, been opposed to the manner in which the Congolese government has been treating the rebels, former FDLR fighters and the Tutsi people in DRC. He has not only financed and provided moral and military material support to M23 fighters, but also gone to the extent of deploying Rwandan troops to the ground to face the Congolese and Sami DRC troops on the battlefield, with the intention to make sure that M23 isn't defeated and to force the Congolese government to bow to pressure and call for negotiations. At one point, he even told his critics that the real question should not be why he is supporting M23, but rather why would anyone not support M23, yet they have legitimate concerns and their war is justified.
Like I was saying, if it were you, why would you not help M23? Actually, the problem is not M23. The problem is not Rwanda.
It's therefore because of this stand by President Kagame that the pro-Tshisekedi protesters made the Rwandan embassy in Kinshasa their first and topmost target. And just like President Paul Kagame, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda is also opposed to a military solution to the Eastern DRC conflict, and has been championing for dialogue as the only viable option for lasting peace in the region. Museveni has on various occasions met leaders of the M23 group, and he even at one point in 2023 revealed that he had met and asked them to write to him their minimum demands, a request that he said he received responses like a wish to be allowed by the Congolese government to go back to the villages, and the demand to be integrated in the Congolese army.
M23 is really a political problem, which can be solved by discussion. Because I don't see the big problem there now, because these M23, I don't think they're asking for big things, sharing power or what. No. I hear they are talking about, I have asked them to send me their minimum demands.
Yes.
What are you demanding?
Demand.
To go back to their villages where they ran away from, to be integrated in the army. What is how can this be a problem?
Out of the same, President Museveni had advised President Tshisekedi to stop the military intervention or to stop asking for military support year after the other, but to sit down at the negotiation table with M23 and agree with them on how to meet their demands for a peaceful resolution of the conflict.
So we are encouraging the Tshisekedi, please, these are simple, but you can agree with these people, and if they don't, if they did not want to discuss, then would treat them as a negative force and act against them. Why don't you give them a final solution, a proposal, agree? Then if they refuse, we know. But now you say they should come, then we shall discuss later. Why? Why do you want somebody to? Because it has happened before. You remember they had captured Goma.
Yes.
Some years ago, and I persuaded them to leave Goma, and they were attacked by this SADC force. They were attacked. Their issues were not addressed. So I think the answer for that is easy. It's not a big problem.
The same being a stand that was adopted by the Kenyan President William Ruto, who, despite deploying KDF troops to DRC earlier in his presidency for them to fight against M23, had changed the tune and called for dialogue instead of a military solution to the crisis. Even as he convened a virtual emergency East African Heads of State meeting on the Sunday of January 26, 2025 to discuss the developments after the fall of Goma, he made his stand clear that a military intervention would not be necessary, and that Tshisekedi should agree for dialogue with M23 for end of the conflict, and nothing else.
We do not see, from where I sit, a possibility of a military solution to the challenges that faced Eastern DRC. It was, it is, and I'm sure it will continue to be the case, that engagement, dialogue, consultations is the only viable way out of the situation in DRC. A direct engagement with M23 and all the other stakeholders in the theater in Eastern DRC is a necessity.
So these positions perhaps angered President Felix Tshisekedi and his close allies or supporters within DRC, who perceive the three East African heads of state as supporters of M23 and thus enemies of the current Congolese government, and that is why they mobilized pro-Tshisekedi protesters to go to the streets of Kinshasa on that January 28, for them to send a message to the international community that they were unhappy with William Ruto, Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni. But the defiling of the foreign embassies doesn't change the fact that it's now clear that President Felix Tshisekedi is an isolated man within the Eastern Africa community, who has no one else supporting his side in the conflict within the bloc. In fact, the whole incident portrays him as a desperate man who is under siege, and who has resorted to inciting his own people to not just rise up against the three foreign leaders, but also against their fellow Congolese of the eastern region who are demanding fair treatment, with hopes that they'll force M23 and Rwandan forces to retreat from Goma and other key towns of eastern DRC. Of course, this is a risky move that might just escalate the situation and plunge the whole DRC into a bigger civil war, that is in the event of the Congolese civilians in the West taking matters into their own hands and resort to fighting against those pro-M23 supporters in the East. And President Tshisekedi is not just a lonely and isolated man on an international scale, but reports have been emerging since the fall of Goma that he is also sandwiched between a rock and a hard place within the government, and has been technically taken hostage by military officers who are blaming him of negligence and incompetence in the face of alerts concerning the poor state of the army. That the military officers who fear a dazzling advance of M23 rebels towards other strategic towns like Bukavu and Kindu in the coming days accuse him of having betrayed the armed forces by entrusting supplies to corrupt civilians, thus leaving the soldiers deployed to the battlefield in precarious and undignified conditions. And since the humiliating fall of Goma, It's reported that the considerable tensions that have materialized within the Congolese military have seen several senior officers demanding that the embattled president refrains from making any public statement, a position that led to the cancellation of his planned address to the nation on Sunday 26, 2025, an address in which he had been set to announce the Democratic Republic of Congo's transition from a state of siege to a state of war with Rwanda. So taken hostage by these officers, Tshisekedi tried to address the nation, but he failed, and the address never materialized even after several postponements the following day.